so the game we're going to be talking about that we took about a couple of months off. We've been busy, but at the same time, we were actually waiting for E3 to end just in case some surprise news happened for the game that we have presented to you. And the one game that is considered one of the greatest RPG games of all time by numerous people. If you're an RPG lover, a lot of people put there in their top 10. I don't know where you put it in your top 10, but it's in the top 10 probably in your list. And if you, even for a new person to RPGs, to the old school people RPGs like us. But that is Chrono Trigger. Now, maybe if you're watching this video or listening to us, you might be questioning, why are you talking about this game on your show? Why are you putting this out on display? And that's a great question. And it's because I want to talk more about why it deserves to be talked about on top of why should it be brought back in a different way. But before we even get into that, I want to sit here and talk about more of the lore of Chrono Trigger because, you know, there might be a listener out there that have never touched Chrono Trigger, never touched it, but heard so much about it. So I would love to just talk about the experience and the lore of it a little bit and talk about the journey of this, kind of give you knowledge before we really set the table of why we picked this and everything. Now, Brandon here, this is probably, now Brandon, correct me if I'm wrong, is this your number one favorite RPG game of all time?
Number two.
Number two. Okay. All right. So I guess I don't know what your number one is, but I'm excited to hear that. But I want to talk about why you love Chrono Trigger so much. How did you get involved in it? And then I will also exchange my stories with that. So I'm going to let the man himself, because he even has, if you've seen in the background, the original box.
All right. So that's not from when I was a kid, by the way. When I was a kid, I didn't play RPGs. I wasn't really into them. My first RPG experience was probably Super Mario RPG, right? Because it was a friend's house and everything. I was more into like tie-in games, like Ninja Turtle games, Batman games, wrestling games, and also the Mario Star Fox and stuff like that. But like, I really wasn't into like RPGs yet, and I would not get into them until the PlayStation era. So I missed my window at playing Chrono Trigger at a young age when it would have been really cool to play it on the Super Nintendo on its original system. So I got into Final Fantasy VII. That is my number one because it was the first RPG that got me into hardcore RPGs. Like Pokemon was there too, but Pokemon's not a riveting story like getting into a Square RPG, story driven for the first time. And it wasn't until my first exposure to Chrono Trigger was the PS1 port. Because it was released along with Final Fantasy IV. Well, I never really got into it then. I tried it. Thought, this is really cool. I like this. And I was also, around that time, 2000, 2001, into Dragon Ball Z. Of course, the artist, Akira Toriyama, did all the artwork and character designs for Chrono Trigger, as well as he has done and as it still does for the Dragon Quest series. Well, I eventually bought that PS1. Originally, when I played it, I rented it or something, and when it first came out, because I was absorbing anything Final Fantasy related at that point. All the ones on the PS1, give them to me. I want to play them all at some point. Mm-hmm. But I didn't buy it until like 2007. So I tried again to get into it. Excuse me. And busy life. I was now had a job. I really didn't have time to dedicate. Didn't really get into it then either, even though I owned it. It would be a few years later. 10 years ago this year, right after New Year's, dove into Chrono Trigger. I bought it on the DS. So the DS copy is the first one I completely... Yes, that one. And I have it back there on my shelf as well. Mm-hmm. I got it from GameStop for like $20, back when it was still affordable. Because your copy is now like $100. Mm-hmm. Mine... like 800,000 somewhere around there, $20. Yeah. So, I played that on the DS, and absolutely fell in love with it. I fell in love with the character of the game. I fell in love with the time travel aspect of it. I fell in love with not only the character of the game, but the characters in the game. You know, I really enjoyed even some of the NPCs and the fact that they named a couple characters after like hard rock band members. You know, Ozzy and Flea and stuff like that. Like, what's this going on here? So after I played it on the DS, like it had such an effect on me that I was kicking myself for never having played it before, having all these chances to play it. And when I started collecting games, I went to a game store just south of where I live. And the first time going in there, you know, I'm testing the waters out, looking around, and in the case he had the complete in box Chrono Trigger. And at the time, on eBay, they were going for about like $300. So I was not prepared to drop $300 that day for a Chrono Trigger. I just thought, wow, for that game having been now named my number 2 favorite game, not just RPG of all time, but favorite game of all time. It's 7 and then Chrono Trigger. Those games are depending on the day, you might get me to slip and say that Chrono Trigger is my favorite game of all time. You know, depending on just how gushy I am about it. But I didn't pick it up that day. But I bought like another game. And so it was like a PS2 game, and the guy's like, oh man, it's a little scratched. I'm sorry, let me clean that up for you. And then he gave the game to me for free. And I'm just like, wow. You know, he goes, I don't want you to get off on the wrong foot here in case that doesn't work. Here it is for free. Bring it back. And then, oh, by the way, since my hours are weird, I'm the only guy that owns this place. I'll write down the number you called next time. That way you don't waste a trip. And I'm like, you know what? It's these small mom and pop shops like this that are what make gaming collecting awesome. You know, because you can go to the bigger places, and I have a chain near me that I go to that's kind of a Midwest chain, and it's a chain, but the people there are good, you know. But it's still a chain. They have set prices. They have to, you know, they don't wheel and deal about prices or anything. They're going to negotiate. It's a chain, but they're good people. So I was talking to my wife, and I'm like, I think for my birthday, I'm going to go down there and buy Chrono Trigger. And she goes, it's $300. I'm like, yeah. And I think I'm going to spend it because I want to support this guy. And she goes, I could go down and buy it for you. And I'm like, well, you know, it's in the box. I noticed the box it's a box. It has shelfware, so to speak. I want to open it up and make sure everything is inside. And if the box isn't in perfect condition, that's okay. The box is still pretty cool. I want the cartridge to be in good condition. I want it to be ripped up label. I'm not going to spend $300 on a ripped up label. She goes, okay. Well, I went to bed, woke up the next day. It was a Saturday, and I had to go to work, so I couldn't go down there to the store. I woke up, and she had bought it for me. She went down there, even though I told her not to go.
That's love. That's love right there.
Yes, it is. And I opened it up, and the cartridge is in perfect condition. The box was how it was. The manual has like one fold on it. It has the poster in there. It's never really been opened. And she goes, "How much? Guess how much it was?" And I'm like, "How much?" She goes, "I go in there, and he remembered me from the few weeks ago that we were in there, and he asked if that game worked, and he said yes." And he's like, he saw this in here, you know, that I saw Chrono, and the guy got it out for her to look at, and he goes, "I got it in my system for $100, but I'll do $80 for it." He had it in his system for the loose cartridge price, not the complete in box price. Mm-hmm. And I got Chrono Trigger for $80, complete in box.
That's awesome.
And I was never so angry to have to go to work on a Saturday because I work second shift. So I woke up at like 2:00 in the afternoon to this awesomeness, and now I went and put it in my Super Nintendo, clicked it on, got the clock. I'm like, I don't want to go to work. I want to sit here and play this all night. But that's how I fell in love with the game. That's how I got my complete in box copy, and that's how I have come to love this game and want to spread the word of it, because this is a game that It's not technically a series. It is, but it's not.
Maybe we'll definitely get more into that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're definitely going to dive into that for sure. But the reason why we're talking about it is because it hasn't been around since the late 90s. And while there are ways to play this game, and you can find it, it's on phones, it's on Windows, Android, it's on the DS, on the PlayStation.
Joe, let me pause you on there, and I wrote something down here. So, as people that don't know, Chrono Trigger came out in 1995, and then in 2001 we get the Chronicles, the Final Fantasy Chronicles, that includes the Chrono Trigger and the Final Fantasy 4. Is it 4 or 6?
It's 4.
4. Okay. Then the DS came out in 2001. Followed by iOS, Windows, and Steam, roughly around 2018.
The DS came out in 2008.
Oh, 2008. Oh, okay.
November 25, 2008.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Then I got the wrong time. Maybe that's when it was announced they were going to do. I don't know. Anyways, but to this day, still, before you continue on, we still don't have this game still ported into the newer consoles as a classic. It blows my mind that it's not on a Switch. In any shape or form. We got thousands of Dragon Quest games, but no Chrono Trigger.
Yeah. Dude. If they said physical copy of just the DS port, if it's a DS port, I'm buying it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have it on DS. I have a 3DS up there. I don't need it on the Switch. But if they said here limited, here's a physical copy, it's ordered.
Mm-hmm.
And it's coming because that this is a game that I want to have future-proofed. I go through the way through the problem or trouble to make sure that I can play Super Nintendo on my modern TV or on my monitor. I bought a RetroTink. I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
I have a good 3DS that I can take care of. I have a PS3 that plays PS1 games. But all of those things, my Super Nintendo, my cartridge, whatever that is, that may fail. I want ways to be able to make sure that games are future-proofed. And that way, for my absolute just say top 10 favorite games. If they release any of those games in a new form, I'm probably going to buy them.
Yeah. Especially if they add some, extra like little bells and whistles or something. Even if it's something like fast forward. Like the battle's faster or something like. Even the smallest things they add on is fine.
Yeah, like the things they've done for those Final Fantasy remasters, where it's like, click this button to have no random battles. Click this button to have every hit be 9999. Like quad 9.
Yeah.
Or like I said, fast forward. Just quality of life, like little cheats or enhancements. Because even though I don't need the cheats, tell you what, when you're on some of those Final Fantasy games, when you got to grind. I don't have the time to grind anymore, guys. I'm a dad. I'm in my 30s. I got to work for a living. So when I have to grind my materia in FF7, it goes by so much faster in the mithril mines to sit there and hit that fast forward button. And I get, or what I do is I grind limit breaks. If I focus on the limit breaks, which it makes it to where I'm not focusing on the materia. I gain so many levels because I'm focusing on using the limit breaks and killing people or enemies. So that's all I'm thinking about. And then I get those leveled up, and by the time I'm ready to move on, I'm a beast.
Mm-hmm.
But that fast forward button makes it go by so much quicker.
Now my story is not as heartwarming as yours. Mine was more of, in quotes, if you're a gamer, how come you haven't played Chrono Trigger yet? That's like me growing up, playing Super, never owned a PlayStation 64, all this stuff. I was told, even through schools and from other people, even people who are not even that hardcore gamers, have at least touched Chrono Trigger one time and said, how come you haven't played Chrono Trigger yet? Are you an RPG fan? You need to play Chrono Trigger. If you play video games, why you haven't played Chrono Trigger yet? It has been so crazy that someone forced on me and say, here's the game, and it was a Super Nintendo copy. Go home and play it. And so I went home and played it, and that was still a time where I was a little bit older, so I was late to the party. kind of like Final Fantasy VII. I was late to the party for that. So for Final Fantasy VII, I didn't get those moments and feelings as they were people played it the first time. But Chrono Trigger is a little different. And that's really in the story right there. I played it, and I'll tell you, and we're going to lean on to the lore of the Chrono Trigger. To this day, for some reason, and people argue other than Final Fantasy VII, it may be 6, that you never really played a game that was written so well about saving the world. We have plenty of RPG games that's all about saving the world. You name it, it's somehow the world's going to come and be destroyed if you don't stop it. And Chrono Trigger was the first one to be a little bit different with time travel. And a lot of people can't do time travel well as Chrono Trigger, right? Chrono Trigger was like it knew its limits, weirdly enough, right? It didn't need to go overboard. It had a simple plot, and it was just how did they want to patch it together. And so playing Chrono Trigger through that game was crazy because that was a journey. Now, most RPG games like Final Fantasy VII or 6, it's mostly here you are in one giant land, and you are on this journey from land to land, region to region, and you're on this journey, on this quest. But Chrono Trigger was different. You're still in the same place, but you're changing time to get through your journey, right? Weirdly enough, you're seeing how the past is, the future is, a couple years down the road, a couple thousand years down the road, and you're just going back and forth, meeting friends on the way. Now I'm paraphrasing this. I'm going to let Brandon break it down of like the whole lore of the story of it for the listeners. But just for me, you never played a game like that where you're going to one thing, finish the story, then you got to hop, go here, and then that connects back to going back here. And these emotions that you're on this ride, and you're learning about these characters on their way through this, and somehow they didn't mess up where you had too many questions to ask about the time. Weirdly enough, you always have questions like, how does this work if this time work like this and then? But Chrono Trigger managed to pull that off, and that was crazy. Even to the point you go to end of time? Are you kidding me? You can easily get overwhelmed with Chrono Trigger, in my opinion. You can, because you're going you're like, what is going on? But if you stick with it, it's something really cool. It's pretty amazing what that is. And still to this day, there has never been another game that surpassed the time travel of Chrono Trigger. Now, a game that I will give honorary mention to, and that's Atlas with Radiant Historia. That's a game that I definitely recommend giving a try. It's probably the closest to a Chrono Trigger feel that you'll ever get. With manage their time travel doing with certain periods of their time more than different eras of a time like Chrono Trigger. But I appreciate that even this game, it's over 20 years old and still gets talked about. And no one still haven't surpassed what Chrono Trigger story and lore and all this stuff has done. So my journey about that was I played it. I enjoyed it for what it was. What a great freaking journey that was. And graphically amazing how they pulled that off on a Super Nintendo. And granted, on the later ones, you get more of the animated cutscenes added to that and everything. Yeah. And sadly enough, I'm pretty sure you had this problem too. It is kind of, it hurts that the PS1 had loading in that game. That kind of gave it more of a bumpy flow compared to like the Super Nintendo later ones. It was just like, so.
Well, because it would load every time you'd open up the menu. Mm-hmm. And it would just be like a little hiccup, yeah.
Yeah. So, Brandon, for the listeners that haven't heard what is the lore of Chrono Trigger, why don't you enlighten them a little bit on the surface top of what is Chrono Trigger?
All right, so like to talk about Chrono Trigger, you have to talk about the development of it first before we get into this, like the overall portion of the story. This is the first ever Square Enix game. Like not the first game when they merged. This was a Dream Team collaboration between like Hironobu Sakaguchi, the guy that created Final Fantasy, and Yuji Horii, who created Dragon Quest. They had a bunch of team members come on from a mixture of the teams to come together to make one work, and that was Chrono Trigger. Another thing and of course, Akira Toriyama did the artwork. But then another thing is that the game had its own composer, and this was going to be this composer's first game, and that fellow's name was Yasunori Mitsuda. And then I guess he fell ill, and then they brought in Nobuo Uematsu to finish off some of the tracks. So in the DNA of this game is Final Fantasy, is Dragon Quest. They're both here, from the developers, from the writers, from the music. It's all ingrained here. I always thought it was weird that Chrono Trigger got included with Final Fantasy Chronicles when it's not a Final Fantasy game. It's almost everything but a Final Fantasy game. Like it's part of it. The reason why they threw that in there was because they couldn't put Final Fantasy 3 out because they didn't have they lost the source code.
And on top of that, based on the research, you can definitely tell that at a certain point in development, this game was almost close to being a Mana game, and you could definitely see the game's similarities to the Secret of Mana and all the other Manas based on the character designs in the game. So this game was almost becoming a Mana game, and then it just codenamed Chrono Trigger at the time, and then spun off to become Chrono Trigger.
So we're then into the game, the story. The story follows young man named Chrono, or whatever you name him. The voiceless protagonist, very Dragon Quest right there, which, I'm usually not that into, but it works because all the characters talk around Chrono. And the one thing that I like about the graphical style, and they would do this for Final Fantasy VI as well, is they were able to have more emotes for their sprites, and it just... They're so over the top and cartoony, and they always crack me up. Just him like,
Mm-hmm.
But they so it follows Chrono, and then he meets up with a girl named Marl, who happens to be, the princess. So what's going on here? A long time ago, an alien creature from outer space fell down to the planet. And it's kind of like a parasite type deal, where it's like it's just hibernating over time. I don't know if it's feeding on resources of the planet, just sleeping. I've heard this alien, this creature known as Lavos. I've actually heard it compared to Genova from Final Fantasy VII.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
And there actually are some similarities with that. Not one-to-one, but, Genova was also a creature from outer space that came down and was very parasitic, and but Lavos was like this big creature of mass destruction. Would be the best way to say it. And in the year 1999, Lavos emerges and sends the world into a post-apocalyptic state. What's funny is that when you're playing as Chrono, and in the year 1000 AD, it's like a mixture. It's almost like steampunk meets Middle Ages, where you're at. There is some technology, but it's not like modern day mixture of any of that stuff. There's still swords, and there's still that kind, but there's like some robots, and then Chrono's friend Luca is like an inventor, ends up creating a teleportation chamber. It's like it's so many weird advancements, but yet it doesn't follow the traditional how we in real life went.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Luca accidentally creates a time warp, and I believe Marl gets sucked into it, and I believe it's like her pendant, right? That kind of activate, because she's going to go through this little transportation chamber, and it activates, and then she gets sucked in, and then Chrono decides he's going to go in after her. They get sucked back in time. into the year 600, so 400 years prior, and the more proper Middle Ages. And the adventure then ensues, because then now you're on a quest through time. It starts off like that, and then it expands further after that. Mm-hmm. Because if I remember correctly, you settle your business there, you go back, and then somehow you end up. Do you go back there first, or then do you go to the future?
No, you definitely go back first, because he has to has to deal with the consequences. Right.
Yeah. But like the way this game deals with, this game, it's on a fairly linear path for a long time, and then it opens up. But it is open while it's linear as well, because you get to go and interact with a bunch of different things, and that's by design, because for you to go and interact with your mom a couple times, or go down here, talk to this person. What this game did really well with the time travel aspect is the little things that you could do when you go back to the past can have a little effect on when you go back to wherever you're going. And so while you're not exploring this big, vast open world, you're exploring the same world in different timelines or different time frames. And I really, really liked. I thought that was a great idea, and so far ahead of its time.
Mm-hmm.
But so what? You end up going to the future, 2000 something. Everybody's living in domes, and it's almost kind of like a mixture of like Mad Max or something like that, but it's like in the future. And then of course, then you go back into prehistoric times, even. You go back and there's dinosaurs, and of course in pure Dragon Ball type fashion, there's like talking dinosaurs that are coming after you and whatnot, creatures. But then there's also like a really advanced society that rises up in the year 12,000 BC that you end up going to. That one where they got floating islands and stuff like that. The game also psychs you out with the villain, and that's one of my favorite parts of the game. That threw me for a loop. I don't know about you, but I wasn't expecting the game to kind of pull a swerve on you. Lavos is the villain of the game, bar none. But like, it's making you think that Magus is the villain of the game for a while, until it's revealed that Magus was just a little boy when his entire world was torn apart, and he wants revenge on Lavos.
Mm-hmm.
That blew me away.
Yeah. Even at the very beginning. And of course, if you are listening to this, spoil all around this place. But you should play. But you should have played this game by now. So you should be like me back in the day. Like, you haven't played it yet. Anyways, but if you haven't played it and you don't want to be spoiled, you should have stopped listening like a minute ago. You can fast forward. Anyway, yeah. But no, I think the twists and turns, even surprise the fact that, like, isn't it crazy that this game even showed you consequences of, like, you can most RPG games, and they don't do this anymore, but most RPG games, this game remembers the actions that you do from the moment you're at the fair playing around to the moment you're in a court, and they're showing evidence like he did this, and this, and you did do those things in this, and you didn't know you did, but you did. Like, he stole that. He stole that sucker for the little girl. For example, I think that's what something happened. But he stole something to give to somebody, and he's like,
ate someone's lunch or something.
And he like you what you thought you were doing nice, you didn't think of, like, you did steal that, and so and the fact that you're in court doing this, and you're it's so crazy that you didn't know, like, I'm going to court, like that threw you through a loop, and like. And then even down the journey, you didn't know, like, the twist and turn Magus, or the fact that there's a huge twist where someone in your party gets sacrificed. I'm not gonna tell you who, but someone gets sacrificed, and you're like, didn't see that coming in that route. So I love the fact it's twists and turns, even though it's straightforward on certain parts. It still kept you going with the fact that there are 16 different endings in this game, right? And that's so crazy based on the little things that you do. And, if you want to look up all those crazy endings, go ahead. But I think that's where it comes back to the replayability, right? It's more of trying to figure out all those endings, but also trying to see which different parties that you want to try out on your journey. Because there's a lot of great characters in the part. Actually, surprisingly enough, there's not a character in there I felt like there were throwaways. Most RPG games, you have characters like, you cool, but I don't want you to meet. You're cool. Here, every character was really cool in their own way. And I like that. I like that for that aspect. So...
Frog is probably my favorite character.
I think Frog's a lot of people. He's my favorite character too, but I think he's a lot of people's favorite character. A lot of people's favorite. His determination and everything.
I know. I also love he wants revenge on Magus for killing his friend, I believe. And
Cyrus, I believe it's Cyrus.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So he wants revenge on him, and then of course the game pulls a little switcheroo on you and actually allows Magus to join your party.
And you would have known that. I don't think you would have known that right off the spot. I think a lot of people choose the other way until someone tells you, and you're like, he could join you?
Because it gets you, so it gets you to the point where you can fight Magus as Frog and avenge. Mm-hmm. Or you cannot. And he will join you as a party member. And so then you have Frog, who wanted nothing but revenge for the longest time. And then now they're working together to stop Lavos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then just the fact that the gameplay battle system was unique at the time, especially when it came to the co-op. Like dual moves, like the X slash.
Like the text and everything.
Yeah.
Because you had dual text and then triple text, where then for you to be able to heal the whole party, you have to use both Marl and Chrono to do like a little swirly heal, and then you can team up with Frog and Chrono and do like that little X slash, and then there were moves where you could do all three of you with it, and then you have your that was my party for most of the game. But I also found stuff with Robo that I liked. Robo's a robot from the future. Isla is actually really cool too, from back in the prehistoric days, back in 65 million and a half BC or whatever. But Magus is really interesting because Magus doesn't really do anything with the text. That threw me off when I first got it. Mm-hmm. He has his own stuff that's going on, and so it's almost like he's a part of the party, but he's not in sync with the party. And I feel like that was done by design. Like he's strong enough on his own, or he's almost kind of like that. I don't know if you guys watch Dragon Ball, but that Vegeta type character. He's kind of like he doesn't want to team up with Goku. He can do it by himself. Yeah. I don't know if I should say it right here or just give it away.
You already gave away one of the twists. So.
The game kills your character, the main character. It kills you. Lavos kills you. Chrono dies. And then the party's left wondering, now what? That's when you get Magus, by the way. That's when you can, right after that. Mm-hmm. And I remember that is honestly the moment that game solidified itself for me as this game released in 1995 was 10 years before its time, 15 years before its time. But I played it 15 years later. Is that long? I'm this. I can't believe this came out in 95. Mm-hmm. This game was brave enough to kill your avatar character almost, because you're making all the choices, you're doing all these things. You are Chrono. You can name him whatever you want. You can name him Bob. You can name him Jeremy. You can name him Brando. Mm-hmm. That is you, and you can go and beat the game without him. That is an outcome. Mm-hmm. Or you can do the cool thing and go back in time with this doll and put him in the spot and save you. Because it's timey-wimey. Yeah. I loved it. I loved it. I'm like, this game's great. Let's go kick this thing's ass. Yeah. You know?
Yeah, and I think that game itself secretly influenced a lot of other JRPG games going forward of these roles. I feel like Final Fantasy 6, 7, 8, all those Final Fantasy games, somehow Chrono Trigger has influence on different things, from the active turn base to even like how to do a villain.
Yes.
Absolutely.
It was very well. It was very creative, very creative, and as I said, really before its time, because when you get to see, Final Fantasy VIII deals with time stuff a little bit, but in a very different way, and I'm not saying that they took anything from Chrono, because it's obviously very different, but Chrono, as much as Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest would team up to become the DNA of Chrono, I feel like what came out of this experience for the developers, they carried forward, and into inspiration for the further works that would come after that. I mean, because you got to think, Square was on fire at this, like right after this. Final Fantasy VII, Parasite Eve, Xenogears, Final Fantasy VIII. That's just those. And there's more. There is so much more going on at Square that they were just firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that would culminate until eventually Square and Enix would actually combine to become one company. And this game is the precursor to that. And it's such a shame, because while this, I almost put this game in the same limelight of uniqueness as Mario RPG. That was Square working with Nintendo on a unique IP and everything. This is Square working with Enix on a unique IP that, is in Legacy. You have Final Fantasy, you have Dragon Quest. Okay, those things are still going. They're still creating new entries and properties and remakes and remasters, and they're lush and they're healthy. And yet here this is. Just like Mario RPG is off on its own. It's not even talked about anymore. Here's Chrono Trigger. And we could sit here and we could talk about every little thing about the game, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to spoil everything. I've given you just enough to make you want to go and have the experience, because I feel like that is very important. The journey is more important than the destination in Chrono. But then you have so many different. If you do a New Game Plus to Chrono Trigger, which this is one of the early games in RPGs to have a New Game Plus on consoles. New Game Plus, go start the game over with everything you already have. You can go beat the game in 15 minutes. There is a portal at the beginning of the game that takes you right to Lavos. And you skip over all the other stuff.
Even about 30, I think about a certain amount of hours in the game, they give you the option. You can go fight them way earlier and skip the whole stories if you're strong enough. They did that because they don't think you're strong enough to do it. But the fact they give you option, it's almost like Zelda Breath of the Wild. You can go fight Ganon right now if you want to. So it's almost like that. So moving on, though, here's the thing. Square Enix has a lot of properties. But Chrono Trigger still gets talked about to this day. And it's crazy that the journey of Chrono Trigger has not gone very well moving on as a series, right? Now, I want to get into why do we not think that this game didn't really get a series or any kind of special treatment? I mean, we got Secret of Mana. Secret of Mana got great treatment. For the last couple of years, it got great treatment. You have Trial of Mana, the remake of it, the remake of Secret of Mana, and even more Mana games coming out, even the remaster of Legend of Mana. Then Final Fantasy is getting all this. I mean, just now recently, they are now remastering again the repixelated of 1 through 6, all bundled together. And Chrono
They're not bundled together. They're individual sales on mobile.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So those games keep getting this new coat of paint. I mean, Crystal Chronicle came back. There's a lot of these games that should not even come back. But here it is. Chrono Trigger still have not been touched or even thought about of continuing that series. Because when it comes to the series, there was a sequel. And for people who don't know, it's called Radical Dreamers. And it was a text-based adventure released only in Japan by Stellaview. It's basically satellite peripheral for the Super Famicom, and people don't know it's like a satellite modem that from a satellite that goes straight into the game. Weirdly enough, you have to check it out. It's weird, but it was set in a story. It was a side story to Trigger, centering around a particular gang of thieves led by Kid, and you probably know where I'm going with this. And her job is to find an artifact of a frozen flame to get revenge, to go after this the villain of her story, Lord Lynx, and she aided by Surge and Gil. And if people don't know, that is connecting you to where we get the sequel, spiritual. People call it spiritual or whatever, but it is a sequel. That is Chrono Cross. And the fact that that game didn't sell really well enough in Japan, so much that it was going to get bundled with Chrono Trigger on the PlayStation, which I think now why we got Final Fantasy IV on replacing that idea, bundled with Chrono Trigger on the PlayStation. But they said this game was too dark tone for Chrono Trigger, that it spun off and became its own game, which is called Chrono Cross. So here we are with Chrono Cross coming out for the PlayStation. Then later on, we get another game, which, by the way, they didn't. The writer for it did not really didn't like how it went, and the fact that fan base have made an English translation of the ROM, so you can go online and watch it. I don't think you can find the copy, but you can go online on YouTube and you can probably read the whole story of how that all went. But then we get to the one that this has been rumored for so long. Rumored, talked about, canceled, everything. And that was the third one, or you call it the sequel to Chrono Trigger, and that was Chrono Break, right? Chrono Break has been talked about for many years. Many, many, many years. And the earliest I heard, I find out that it's talked about was in 2001 when a trademark happened. And there was really not much to talk about. Because even though everybody, the main three big three guys were coming back to, everybody. But some people didn't want to come back to it. Some people were moving on to Final Fantasy XI, the online game, to people quitting the company to go freelance. So this game never got the bright of day. And funny enough, as of 2021, the trademark has expired. So Brandon, you can go make Chrono Break if you want to. Anybody can go make their own Chrono Break if they want to, right? In that aspect. But here's the part that hurt. And I found this quote. And Brennan, I need you to try to understand this with me, because I feel kind of hurt that they said this. At E3 2009, senior editor, vice president Shinji Hashimoto of Square Enix remarked, if people want a sequel, they should buy more copies of the game. Brandon, I throw this at you. How many copies is it going to take of Chrono Trigger to get that to happen? This game has sold more than 1 million copies, and it still sells pretty well on everything that has been brought back.
Yeah, right. I mean, Chrono Trigger sold pretty decently well, and it needs to be re-released again to gauge interest. I mean, I think over time, this is one of the rare situations where you have a game that is being kept alive by people like you and me, by us. It's like, hey, this game is worthy of your time to go and play. It's 20 hours. It's not too long. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It is a good but not overly complex story. It's easily digestible. Go play it. It's awesome. It's honestly a very great story-based RPG to begin your work. If you've never played RPGs, to begin your trek, I feel like it's a great intro, because it's not overly. This game doesn't overly punish you for not like grinding. You don't need to grind too much. You don't need to go out there and take a break just to be able to keep up. And one of the things that, honestly, Chrono Cross, it's not a sequel at all to Chrono Trigger. Number one, the gameplay is completely different, which is fine. A very Final Fantasy of that, to be able to create its own new battle system. The problem is that the original was so good that I think that you would rather just build upon what was there rather than just create a whole new system and not Final Fantasy it up. But like, the only other part that really makes it like Chrono-y is like whereas Trigger was time travel, Cross is like like other dimension. It's almost like Sliders. If you watched that old '90s show, other Earths or other dimensions, other alternate realities. But overall, to me, Cross doesn't hold up. Like, it just doesn't. And then after that, I feel like that is where you said it didn't sell as well. And they're like, well, if you want a sequel, buy them.
Well, okay. So I didn't say Chrono Cross. I was saying the little sequel, Radical Dreamers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah, that's the satellite game. That's the satellite game. They didn't sell well, so that's why it didn't get bundled with Chrono Trigger on the PS.
Okay.
But
so if it didn't sell well, then why is it on such a niche? Why is it on such a niche way to get it? That would be like, hey, Mega Man: The Wily Wars, which is only available in America on the Sega Channel, didn't sell very well. Well, no crap. How many people do you know actually had the Sega Channel?
Yeah.
Now, I didn't have it. I didn't even have internet until 2002. So it's like, of course it didn't. If you want to gauge something's actual success, you would want to make sure that it's like widely available, where people would more likely be able to play it.
Yeah, and so that's why that story they were mentioning in Radical Dreamers became Chrono Cross. So weirdly enough, see, that's why I was saying like it's a hard split because people don't consider it a sequel and some people do. I consider it a sequel for what it is, and honestly, I can probably tell I don't think you were that big of a fan of Chrono Cross. I actually enjoy Chrono Cross. I actually enjoy for what it is. I thought it was something new and risky, and I like the way they took that. Do they have the most memorable characters? No, but do they have too many characters? Hell yeah, they do. So you pick and choose. Yeah. There's like, I think over 60 characters maybe in this game that you can run into. But I kind of like that. It was kind of like a buffet, and you pick who you want. I liked it at the time. And I think honestly, a HD edition of that game would look great to this day. Now, it's never going to be 2D, but just looking back at that game, compared to other RPGs in the Square Enix library, this one looked like the better versions of some of those. So I personally like Chrono Cross for what it is, and I actually would say I wouldn't mind seeing a return of that. So, anyways, I'll let you continue on before I tell you the next part.
No, that's really
okay.
That was kind of like the end of my little diatribe.
Okay, so with that in mind, though, back to what he said, if you want a sequel, you need to buy more. That is, to me, a lazy answer. Because the fact that, look where we're at now as a gamer. What happened to the whole talk of Final Fantasy VII? That this game was never going to see a brighter day, and people need to buy more copies of it. And here we are now. So with Final Fantasy VII being up there as one of the greatest RPG games to a lot of people's list, along with Chrono Trigger.
Sure.
Why is Chrono Trigger not getting this attention that it deserves and getting some fresher coat of paint? Now, people can argue Chrono Trigger shouldn't have been touched. But then again, people argue that Final Fantasy VII should have been touched at the time. But if you got the right people to do it in the right setup, you could pull it off. Now, in 2015, there was an interview with the writer, and he also said that he wasn't part of the project that was Chrono Break at the time before it got officially canceled. But he said that if it was him doing the writing, his idea was going to be some of the characters from Chrono Cross were going to go back in time to go help Chrono and the gang. So it was going to be this grand finale of all these characters coming together to finish this epic story. Now, I don't know how that would work out. It might have been way too big kind of thing, too big for their own good. Like the thing about Chrono Cross is the world, the venture felt big, but the story was simple. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of opposite of Chrono Cross.
Yeah.
Like, the story was a little complex, and the journey was small. So, I don't know how Chrono Break would have gone, but it just never happened. So, Brandon, my question to you, and to the listeners, we'll get to the point of our show. Because we haven't talked about what the point of our show yet is. But why do you think Chrono Trigger just never got this chance to become something special, a series?
Number one, it was released near the end of the Super Nintendo's life cycle. I feel like attention had started to shift over to the PlayStation and the N64, which was coming. I feel like a lot of games kind of got overlooked, around that time. And honestly, I think Chrono was one of them, even though it sold well, especially in Japan. And, I feel like overall, Chrono Trigger kind of gets like, it's right at it's almost like, I'm trying to think of another good example of a game that kind of gets like under Final Fantasy 9 is another great example. It got released in November of 2000. October 2000, PS2 is out. So are you going to go back and play the PS1 game, or are you going to be all in your new PS2 games if you got a PS2? Mm-hmm. It's all about the hype. It's all about the new, always about the new. So number one, I feel like that is a big issue. But also with the new systems came the next generation of RPGs. And while I feel like you could probably argue and say Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger are like the apex of the sort of like the 2D era of RPGs, along with Secret of Mana or something like that. Probably throw in a third. But like those games right there are about as good as you're going to get as far as 2D RPGs from that era. The next evolution of that was right around the corner. So again, on with the new, more new. It could also be the same. That same thing could be said for why Earthbound never really took off as a series, even though a third game was made. But like, why it doesn't really exist around today? It was maybe bad timing. But really, they did go through the effort to port that game to the DS, and not just port it, make it better on the DS. You do get those animated cutscenes from the PS1 port. You do also get a whole new setup with the dual screens and all the menus and the selects are down at the bottom. Cleans it up so much. The Chrono Trigger DS, it's not just another port. It's almost the definitive way to play it. In my opinion. I mean, you can play it on a whole bunch of different ways, but I feel like that is the best way. So after that, why didn't anything else happen with it? Well, honestly, if I had to wager a guess, why didn't we get the next Final Fantasy remake on the DS? We got Final Fantasy 3, the original, right? And Final Fantasy 4. It was all both done the same style. Rumor was they were going to do 5 and 6 as well. Why didn't we get that? Priority shift. Different ideas. There were different teams working on different things. What was Square doing at that time? Final Fantasy 13. Much different kind of style of game. 13.2, 13.3 was a different style as a game. They were moving towards 15, which is a more action-based style of game. Honestly, I think multiple reasons over the years are why Chrono Trigger keeps getting overlooked. Now, my opinion, with the more effort put into keeping this older system of games alive, whereas Final Fantasy moves forward with its FF7 remakes and it's more action based and it's fun and it's great, that's cool. But then you also have like the in-house team of Square, the RPG Factory, that's putting out, with Octopath Traveler, which is more of a old school RPG. They're putting out Wink, I Am Setsuna, which that's almost a spiritual successor to Chrono in gameplay, right? So I feel like there's almost no excuse now with Square having a really good working relationship with Nintendo. I don't understand why you don't get a team to clean up and put out a really good remastered DS port on the Switch. And if they want to see how well it does, do it. You put out a full remake of Secret of Mana and Trials of Mana. You put out the collection of Mana, which is the old school ports of that series,
Final Fantasy Legends stuff, yeah.
And then so why not? Like literally, the question here is, but then you have the other side of it. the Square is such a back and forth type of pendulum because you have like the Collection of Mana. That's a really cool deal to get that on like a hard copy. All 3 old games. And then you have, we are going to re-release pixel perfect versions of FF 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 individually for $15 on the mobile platform. So, like, what? Put them together, put them on the Switch. Why are you doing that?
Yeah, I'm surprised that there's not another Final Fantasy Chronicle kind of package per se for the next gen, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they're afraid. I think they are scared of what they want to do with it. You know, it's one of those like. It felt like Final Fantasy VII is easier to do because there's still stuff you can do in there. There's stories that can still be untold and all this stuff. But Chrono Trigger, like, what? I guess they don't know what they can do with it. That's the only thing I can think of, and I think I disagree with it. I think there is stuff you can do with it, but I think they're afraid. We can't use the excuse anymore. Buy new copies, we'll get it. We passed that.
Yeah,
we passed that point. Okay, so you need to do something. Do something with it.
I also feel if this ever gets brought up in a boardroom, you know, where you have like executives and like big head developers, the question is, well, what do we do to make it different? What do we do to make it now?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's always the answer. I don't think that's always the answer. You know, in a case like this, whereas when we get to the actual like you know, heart of what our show is about, when we actually get into that part here in a second, I have my own ideas. You don't have to do that. Like at the bare minimum, you do exactly what I said. Put out a nice, clean remaster of the DS port, and put it out there. You can put it out digitally. You can put out a cool physical copy, and have people eat it up and see how that does. And then from that point on, you're like, well, do we want to do a full remake, or do we want to do a sequel? You know, they have a set you know, audience now on the Switch that are getting exclusive old school style RPGs. Meanwhile, like for the other consoles, they're putting out the more newer style, which I think is really neat because they realize we can't put FF7 Remake on the Switch. It's too demanding and taxing or whatever. Mm-hmm. But we can do this cool thing over here that's exclusive for it. I think this thing can be a poster child for that Switch audience. Mm-hmm. I think it could live there, whether we get just that one, or they go, well, let's put it out there, and you know what? We're gonna make a whole new title.
And that's that's cool, and that's a danger at the same time, because bring that nostalgia, hooking up with Nintendo would be awesome. But everybody else would lose their minds on both sides. Yeah. One is like, it's back. And two, how dare you not let it be for everybody, right? So it's Chrono Trigger's touchy. It's very touchy. Out of all the other RPG games, Chrono Trigger is the most touchiest one to me. Because no one's flipping out for Dragon Quest as much of being like when it was Nintendo exclusive for a while. You know, no one was touchy about Final Fantasy on other consoles. You know, it knew its home. Everybody knows Chrono Trigger was first home was Nintendo, so it might work out, but I can see a lot of people being triggered by it. But as you know, this is the World Gaming Trade Show, and the point of our show is to take classic games that we haven't heard in a while, like Chrono Trigger, and bring them out in the forefront and talk about what should be done, what should be made, and who do we think can help make it happen. And if you are new to the show, thank you. If you haven't heard all our other stuff, please check out all the stuff like we did. We talked about Soul Blazer. We talked about Metal Storm. We talked about Def Jam Vendetta. We talked about Radiata stories. We have gone all the way back, even going to the very beginning, even Duck Hunt, Kung Fu. Go listen to them. They're great. You can start anywhere you want. There's no right order. Jump in. You like one, go to the next one. That's the goal here. Why does this game need to come back? Why is this important? It needs to come back because I feel like that it deserves it. And second, I think it's, even though it's legend among a lot of people, I still, later on, I think it's going to easily get forgettable. It needs to come back into a new light and get in the hands of more people to understand it more. Brandon, what do you think? Why do you think that?
I definitely think you have a recipe here The world is rich enough. The characters are good enough. There's a risk of going too far. I look at what they did with the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I like it because I love that world. But they definitely took a 10-hour portion of the original game and turned it into a 25-hour trek. They stretched it out. I don't think you need to do that with this at all. I think you keep it around the same length. You could maybe lengthen it just by a little bit by adding some new sections. But going forward, I have interesting ideas.
Now, before we get into your interesting ideas, I know we want to get to the meat of this, but I do got to do two honorary mentions. This series, and you might have heard of these stories. This series has such a giant fan base that people couldn't wait for Chrono Trigger to come back in some shape or form. So two things happened. Two companies, two developers decided to take matters in their own hands to try to create their own version of Chrono Trigger. And the first one I want to talk about is Chrono Trigger Resurrection. It was developed by Kazar Laboratories, if I'm saying that right. And basically, this is around 2004, I want to say, or 2014, one or the other. Anyways, they were trying to do their own edition of making it a 3D version all around for the N64 at the time. And then later on, they talk about GameCube and Xbox and all this stuff. But they started out with a demo. And of course, you know what happens. It got popular online. And what happens when you're popular online? People see. People talk.
They see, and then you get a cease and desist.
There you go. By Square Enix. So remember, Nintendo's not the only one that does it.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Square Enix. And every time you always feel like that, when they do that, that means like, oh, are they planning something with it? Is that why they're planning something? You know? No. It's like, don't touch our stuff. Okay? But there was one more. This one was actually completed, but never got released. And this was called Chrono Trigger Crimson Echoes. And this one was a ROM hack of Chrono Trigger. And it was set between Trigger and Chrono Cross 5 years after Trigger. And basically, you would play with all the original characters, go across different periods, and they would try to stop a villain attempting to change the past. And this was in development from 2004 to 2009. It was 98% done at that time, and then when it was ready to release, cease and resist. So, Square Enix came back again, and they're like, no. And you know the biggest problem with both of those editions? It got too big. When you get big, they're gonna see it. So with that in mind, it actually got leaked on accident, and people managed to get a copy of it. If you want to see the whole story and the gameplay of it, you can always go to YouTube. Just look it up. It's right there. I looked it up before this recording. Yep, you can watch the whole story to see what their vision was and their ideas with it. It's not canon. Please, I make that very clear. It is not canon. Okay, so, but I understand people that want to put matters in their own hands. They're like, we can't wait. We want to do it ourselves. And I get that. But I feel sorry and not sorry for people that just don't understand, like, you can't take other people's property and just make it your thing. It sucks. I understand that. But you can't do it like that. Especially you're taking that property, because the problem is it's not so much what you do good with it. The problem is what people can do bad with it. That's always the worst case. That's why they stop these people. You can make a great game, but then these people can do stuff bad to this game, either from making pornographic stuff with it or anything beyond that. So it's not so much their fault. I don't blame them for taking the chance on it. It's just that's how it is. It's like and I think anybody would say the same thing. If you made an iconic character and someone took it and did something good or bad with it, you got to stop it. You just got to stop it, because you're like, I don't want this to come back on me. I don't want that reputation to be burned, all that crap. So, but I appreciate them attempting to try this and see what their vision is. But sorry for that. Brandon, anything you want to add to that?
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, you have to make sure that no one's going to damage your IP. I mean, because even if you're not actively doing anything with it, it's still a property that you own that can make you money. And so why would you potentially let someone release something that could be misconstrued as official?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so absolutely. I agree.
And it hurts me for them that you spend that many years to be shut down. That's a lot of years down the drain kind of for that. And that's why I'm like, I remember the episode way back. It's like, fan made games are very dangerous to make. Unless you just make it and then release it on the day and no one knew it, it's a surprise drop, you might be okay until it got to be shut down. But once everybody catch wind and they're getting high for it, you might as well stop. They're going to come after you.
Yep.
So, but that's their vision. But we have our own visions, and that's why we're here on the World Gaming Trade Show. And I got to let Brendan go first since he loves this game so much that he would probably trade his 2 kids for the next copy. No, I'm just kidding. He wouldn't do that. He wouldn't do that.
Some days, for sure. Some days. I tell you what, man.
But I want to hear his vision first, and who's he thinking? So, Brendan, let it loose, man. We got plenty of time. Listeners, you're the first half of our origin bringing here. Now we're here to give you the appetizer, the meal, the entree. Here it is. Brendan, give him that taste. Tell him what's your thinking. What's your vision? What should Square Enix do for Chrono Trigger?
I've spent 2 months trying to think of the best way for this to happen. And this is a little bit of a cop-out, but I feel like the best way to recapture the magic of Chrono Trigger, if you're going to do a remake, is to kind of do it the way that it was done before. You get some of the heads of this company, Square Enix, together. So this is going to be in-house. And you get them to collaborate. So you bring back Yuji Horii. You bring in Tetsuya Nomura from the Final Fantasy side. And they are executive producers, the producers on this project. But the guy who's going to direct the project is the guy by the name of Takeshi Yukikawa, if that's how you say it. Now, who's this guy? He's the guy who has directed Dragon Quest XI. He's directing Dragon Quest XII. A lot of what I would do gameplay with this game hinges off of what has been set with Dragon Quest XI. Notice way earlier in the podcast, I mentioned the Final Fantasy VII Remake, namely the intermission DLC that I actually have not played, but I know this exists. In the intermission DLC, you play as Yuffie and a new character named Sonon. And they have like basically dual techs where they get to team up and do moves together. And literally, that is the only thing from the game that I've seen. I haven't spoiled myself on the story part of it. I don't know much about it. But when I saw that, I'm like, oh boy. Because to me, when I'm thinking about FF7 Remake Part 2, I'm thinking about Tifa and Cloud doing dual techs. Thinking about Barrett and Cloud and Tifa doing triple techs and Red 13 and all this cool stuff that you're going to be able to do. So what I would do is I would have the Armor Project team, who's the main team for Dragon Quest, head this up with team members from the first division of Square that deal with the Final Fantasy side. And what we're going to get is kind of a mix of turn-based and action.
Okay.
So, have you ever played Dragon Quest XI?
I had not enough to justify, but I know the battle system.
The battle system, the enemies are out in the field, and you go in there, and you kind of go into a different field of view, and you do the turn-based. So what I would do is I would have a very similar active time battle to Final Fantasy X-2. I really love that because you could really do cool combos, it seemed like, because you could really time it right, and boom, 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 boom. And what I liked is that they were kind of like, also just like Chrono, kind of not always in the same spot in the battlefield. That's something about Chrono that I always really liked. How like your battle screen was just the field that you were already in.
Yeah, they just run they go in places wherever. Yes, like, it's more like they get interrupted. Like they're just walking around, they get interrupted, and they just spread out wherever they can span out. Right? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So like we would still have something like that, But I've toyed with the idea of like having them move around, kind of like the more of a Tales style. I'm not sure if I would do that.
What about
but
12? Would that be a better comparison? Final Fantasy 12? Would that be a better
yeah,
comparison?
I'm not sure if I would have them move around like that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm not sure if I would actually go that far.
Okay.
But I definitely would focus on the text. And then, of course, the one thing that I loved about Dragon Quest XI was the two games in one.
Okay.
Where you have the full 3D game, but there's a 2D version that is like old school.
Okay.
So for my version of Chrono Trigger, would borrow from that. It would have a brand new 3D remake with all of the areas and locales that you're familiar with, completely remade faithfully in 3D. Because honestly, I wouldn't add too much to the story. Maybe you'd take the liberty to maybe flesh some stuff out, and maybe because that's part of the appeal of Chrono is that it's not overly complex.
Mm-hmm.
I want to keep that at its heart. But then packaged along with this would be a nice, crisp reproduction of the original game.
Okay, like a code or something to download it digitally or something like that.
No, what I liked about the Dragon Quest game, you could switch.
Okay.
You could switch. Now, not like you can't do like Halo where it's like, here's the
fly.
original. Now here's all the graphical updates. You couldn't do that.
Not on the fly, right? Is that what you're basically saying?
No.
Okay.
But literally, it's the same game. And you can, I want to play the 2D version. And it starts you over with the 2D version.
Okay.
And while the remake has like all the voice acting and all the cinematics and cameras angles, the 2D version is that same scene, but just with the little sprites and with the like the text box. And what I would have it be just the original game, but go through it and clean it up. Make it look good on widescreen televisions. Make it to where it's like it's not just a port. Make it a worthwhile release to go along with it. So that's exactly what I would do with it. And it is a little bit of a cop-out instead of trying to find another developer that could do it really well. And I racked my brain forever. But I kept coming back to my experience with Dragon Quest. And where man, I'm excited to see what they're coming out with 12, but I really felt like where Final Fantasy is taking it into the future with RPGs and action, and Dragon Quest is keeping it faithful. Just as much as we said for those games on the Switch, as a series, the Dragon Quest has never really deviated from itself.
Mm-hmm.
It stayed true to what it is, and I feel like you could borrow from some of that with Chrono, because what makes up both of these, as its DNA, as I said earlier, both Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest are in its structural DNA. So I would definitely take what they've already done with 11, but man, you bring in Nomura in there to help and pinpoint some to make it a little bit more actiony. I'm not saying you need to have attack buttons like that and make it not turn-based. I definitely want to keep it turn-based, but also the argument can definitely be made for why it should be more action-based, because I feel like then it would appeal to a wider audience. As much as Dragon Quest XI sold great for the people who wanted it and have it on an Xbox or PlayStation and Switch, maybe PC, it could be more palatable as a more action-oriented title. So therefore, I don't think it would be a leap to take what I've already thought of and then go that Final Fantasy 12 route, or a Tales of route where you're running around on a little field in a bubble, and then you could start cycling in. You have shortcuts for your text. L1 and box to do the cross slash, and then you have like a cooldown or like a load up period for your ATB to be able to do another tag.
Okay.
But I would. Yeah, I think you keep it mostly simple. You don't want to. I don't think go the FF7 remake route with it. I think that's way too far.
Yeah, no, don't do it in parts. No parts.
Yeah, don't do it in parts. But I mean, even from a gameplay perspective, don't make it big, run around, sprawling, hack and slash almost. Like that's fun and I enjoy it for what that is. But I don't feel like that fits here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like it fits into the character of what Chrono is.
Okay. As Brandon goes simple, I go ridiculous. If you have listened to the show, sometimes I go simple, Brandon goes ridiculous, he goes simple, I go ridiculous. I'm going ridiculous. So I have my pie in the sky, one pie in the sky moment, and I will add that to the end. But of course, I think it has to be in-house, right? It has to be. But they do collaborations with people. Now, granted, people probably knew that where Final Fantasy VII Remake is, it was not in that performance years back when they were working with Cyberkinetic. And we had a different version of it. So they have worked with people before, it just didn't work out for them, for example. And of course, we have Babylon Fall working with Platinum. And they're doing something with that. So they will work with people that fit their quarter. So the developer I pick. Now you're talking about get everybody back. Well, I got an answer for that. The developer I'm picking for them to pick, and the reason I pick because he said that the game that he put out called Fantasian might be his last game that he puts out. Okay, and Fantasian looks awesome. It's on Apple Arcade. It looks amazing. I want to play it, and I hope it comes on Switch. You have to check it out, Brendan. You'll see where I'm going with this. But I think they should collaborate with Miss Walker. Why? Because the head person of Miss Walker is Samaguchi. The guy that brought you Blue Dragon, Lost Odyssey, Last Story, and of course Fantasian. So you got the original guy with his team that could probably know what Samaguchi's vision is if they were brought back for that. Plus, Toriyama did help him with Blue Dragon. So you got that there. So that could be a nice little loophole to bring them all back together with the help of Miss Walker. So, now when it comes to the game itself, I think that I agree. Why mess up something that is already there? Let's not go over alternate. But what I would like is just a little extra stuff here and there. Just a little extra stories, I think, that gives the characters more lore. Like, what about Chrono's dad?
Yeah, like who and what.
Yeah, what, can we get a little story about that? What about a side story on that? What if he goes back in time and he gets to see his dad? Like, that'd be kind of cool, just to see what happens there. Because
that's not even a story element that's even touched on, really, and that could be very emotional.
Yeah.
Well, and they kind of borrow from that. I mean, you can also like because the whole thing with Luca and her mom. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We get a little extra content of we're going in time, but it'd be kind of cool just to see like, what about these characters' families or something in that time, or even go to the future. What to see Chrono's mom. Maybe she's dead. Maybe she has. Maybe something else happened. I don't know. I really don't know what happens, but it'd be cool just to see how that would look going back into that. Another thing too, when it comes to the look of it. Now you went Dragon Quest, and I agree. I would think Dragon. I would think Blue Dragon for mine, just because it's Miss Walker.
Cool.
But both Teriyama, right? So it doesn't matter.
Right.
So both looks would be really great to see those characters because they'll you get that I don't want to say claymation, but they kind of look like kind of a little claymation, but not right. They just look very shiny.
Well, it's like that 3D anime style looks very weird sometimes because back in the day you had cell shaded. Cell shaded is that, if you guys don't know, it's what they did with Zelda
Wind Waker.
Wind Waker, yeah, where like it looks cartoony. So then when you were doing anime stuff, you would do like cell shaded to make it look 3D cartoony. But now you're taking that same design and you're just putting it in 3D, and it looks very. It's like they're doing their best job to try and mix anime with Pixar. Like it does look. Whereas if it was real world, it would look really detailed and like for this, it does look very shiny.
Yeah. So either way, I think it's still a good choice. I don't think like when you said Final Fantasy VII, and I agree with you, but I think what you were also trying to think was not make them realistic. They should not be looking realistic. This is a fantasy based on it was based on the anime cutscenes, this game was an anime turned to a video game. So basically, so it needs to stay animated, cartoonish to me.
Absolutely.
So with also that in mind, I think it'd be kind of cool if we get a couple extra timelines added to the game. And the one I would like to see is a couple of years before the end of the world. Just to see, I would love to see a world where we saw seeing flying cars or seeing something more futuristic for a second. You know, that'd be kind of cool. Now, we saw, I think it was in the year 1600 AD, I want to say. It was like an Ice Age kind of feel, I think, right after or something like that. But anyways, I would like to see kind of like a cool feature. Something for Luca. Because Luca, I don't think Luca really got a moment. Like, that'd be kind of cool for her. Like, this is the future. This is awesome. This is what I've been waiting for. You know, that'd be kind of cool.
Right. Yeah, because the future she sees is like broken down and dilapidated. And, you know, like there's technology there, but it's not in its prime. It's not shiny. It's not new. It's not robust. No, absolutely. No, I absolutely, I 100% agree with that, where you could actually find some ways to expand the story where you don't, as we said earlier, some games just have too much padding. Don't necessarily add this as padding. Just expand it just enough, you know, to get more character moments. Because with this base game being 20 hours, you can easily add another 10 hours of stuff, and the game is not going to overstay its welcome.
No, it's just more of it's. If anything, I think we're on the same mindset of we're just trying to give more characters more lore.
Yes.
And so adding more stuff to help those characters develop more would really help.
Imagine Isla going to that, you know, 1997 world. Like metal pterodactyls, and it's just a plane, you know?
Yeah, that would be awesome. It'd be so awesome because that's what we want to see. We want to see how these characters react to each other more than in the other game. They just accepted it. Most of these characters never really got to express how they feel about what's going on. I would love to see her in the future of flying cars and stuff and just see how she would react to that. And that's another thing too. I would love depending on the party, I would love different dialogues of the situation they were in. You know, this is what they would say if these three are together, or you change one character. This is what this person says. You know, I would love to see different dialogue of people interacting with you. They're like, what's that? Is that a primitive? Is she from the museum of like history or something? Is she going to a cosplay party? I don't know. It'd just be kind of like funny interaction and more into the world for what that is. And I would like to spend a little bit more time going into those worlds, like in the future. I think the future of the post-apocalypse, I think you were there for quite a while, even to the part where you did the racing, which the racing needs to upgrade. The great race needs to upgrade. Definitely. Because that one takes a while if you don't know what you're doing. But I would also love other stuff like that. Now, here's my other thing. And I'm going to challenge you this question. Would a 4-people party be too much? Or does it need to stay with 3?
I think it needs to stay with 3 because I believe when you have 4, it starts going overload with the tech-based system in mind.
Okay.
I think if you would expand it, it would be too much. One thing to add to something that you said about going to other timelines, one thing that you could do to kind of expand time in those areas would be to like each place has its own like little side quest stuff.
Okay.
And before you go to complete the game at the end, you're free to travel within the timelines. And you can wrap up those side quests with any of the combination of the characters, so you can bring some of the characters to different timelines. Imagine taking Magus back to 600, and then you're there with Frog, and then everyone's like, "Oh, it's Magus." Yeah. And then he's like, "Oh," you know. Yeah. He's getting irritated that people are like freaking out about him.
And those side quests, I want some side quests that really hit you. You know what I mean? Not just for the hell of it. Like, it could be a side quest of, like, in the future, Chrono wants to see what it looks like back in his hometown. That could be a side quest, just going right back over there and just see what happens. And maybe fight a little mini boss or something like there that, you know, that's tearing down the house or something like. I don't know. Even to the point where, even the choices you make, I want them to have a little bit more depth in here. And everything like that. I think seeing seeing the courtroom after you get accused again would look awesome in that 3D realm. Just seeing more people crowded around you and just seeing how that looks would be really cool. To the part you're escaping and all that stuff, I think that'd be really cool. So now a lot of people can argue, why doesn't it get the Octopath Traveler? And I think that's the easy. A lot of people will say that'd be the easy way because you get the 2D and 3D in both of them. And I would accept that. But I think Chrono Trigger deserves something more special than that. For a game we don't even know it'll ever get a continuation. If this is my go big or go home moment. So I think they should just go big and make this great. So the one thing I think will blow people's minds, to me personally, and I think this, and the only reason I say this, because I think the PS5 and this next generation could pull it off, but at the same time, it might be too much work. And you can agree or disagree with me, but I think it'll blow your mind. So how do they travel? They got the famous spaceship, right? Right. This and they get, and in the machine they have a different clock. Hence, it has a C on it for people that don't know this is Chrono. It has different years you can pick and everything like that. And you get zapped into the time you're at. Here's just what I want. Hear me out. Hear me out. How cool would it be when you travel, you see the world change before your eyes? And I mean, let's say you're in the future, right? And you're going to the prehistoric times. You are seeing ever development slowly disappear, be rebuilt up, disappeared again, and then you're seeing trees, stones, while you're sitting in one place. Because you're not really zapping. I guess you are zapping per se, but I think it'd be kind of cool if you just sat there and you just see the world just change all around you, and then you're just seeing for everything for what it is. I think that'd be kind of cool, and you're fast forwarding it. I think that would be amazing to see that. That you're just seeing. It's almost like the episode of Futurama, the forward time machine.
Yeah.
And you're just seeing stuff just go. I think that'd be so cool for Chrono Trigger if you can do that. If you can just see the world just change back and forth. Now, that could be hell development. That could be development hell. And I think that would be almost impossible. But if they could pull that off, that would be freaking amazing. But all case, they could just zap and appear in somewhere else. I don't care. But that would blow my mind. If you could just, because I don't think there's ever a game I can think of where you just see stuff speed up that quickly, other than simulations like SimCity and stuff like that, but not like with the in-game engine. I think that'd be freaking amazing to see.
That's definitely, it's not the same, but the one thing that I've seen recently from a new game that really blew my mind was the traversal in the new Ratchet game.
Mm-hmm.
On the PS5. And, because Ratchet and Clank is not necessarily a title that you think that would define the next-gen graphical capability. And I haven't played it, but I've watched some. It looks like a real-life Pixar movie come to life.
Yeah.
And the smoothness. It's almost like when you warp, your character, like, the level warps to the character. It's weird looking. It looks funky, and not entirely in line with 100% with what you were saying, but when you said stand still, I'm like that's exactly what I thought of, using the more modern day new technology of being able to visually awe you and make going through time should be an event. Mm-hmm. It's like in Star Wars when you jump to light speed. It has a look and feel to it. It's like when you go back in time in Back to the Future. It has a look. There's a whole process. The sparks and things, and the trail of flames. Mm-hmm. It's a spectacle.
Yeah.
Why not? So why not do that?
Yeah. Also, I'm glad you brought up Ratchet Clank. Ratchet Clank is one of my favorite series of all time, and I can also accept a wave. Like, if you press the button, you just see a giant wave come across your ship. Say you're in the distance and you're in your machine, you just see this giant wave. But in that background of that wave, you see the time. So the most wave at you, then that's the time you're in. I can accept that one too. That'd be kind of cool. But yeah, I agree. Like, time travel should be this moment because it just blows your mind that you're traveling to prehistoric times. I want to feel that I'm going back in that time, So, and I think time travel is the very important, one of the most important things in the game. Even the fact of, we didn't even talk about how the end of time would look like. How the hell would end of time look like for this game? The moment you're walking down, looks like just a normal street with different time zones with a man standing by a pole. Like, how's that going to look? That's going to be crazy. How crazy would it be you walking and you can literally like see these times going at the same time? Like, you just look and you see prehistoric and you're just seeing dinosaurs moving around. You look in your world, people moving on. In game, that's insane. That's insane. And so I think that these are ideas that Square can do. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. They just got to just add on stuff that will just bring the lore more. Because I think that's what it is. It just needs more lore, more discovery, more character development for these characters. Because they're here for the ride, but I want to know a little bit deeper of them. I want to know more about the princess and her kingdom and everything like that. I want to learn more about Luca. You know, I want to learn more about Frog. Yeah, Frog got turned into a frog. Yeah, I don't know his real name. Sorry, that sounds kind of redundant.
Glenn.
Yeah, Glenn got turned into a frog, but
also his theme in that game, his song is my favorite song in the whole game.
Dude, the opening map song was my favorite song. That's my favorite right there, man. It's so blessing. But just to see what Glenn was doing before, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
To the moment he pulls the Master Sword, like the Muramasa. I mean, like there's a lot of great moments Chrono Trigger has. And they can turn that up to 11. They can Spinal Tap it. Okay? So I would love to see more of that. Brendan, is there anything else to the lore of Chrono Trigger you would love to see?
Oh, man.
Don't hold back. We ain't coming back to this episode.
I know. I would love because in the original game you get Magus so late, and the big reveal of that he is actually the little Prince Janus. Or Janus, I'm not sure how that.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see more development with him after you get him.
Okay.
You know, I see Magus as this, to again call back to Dragon Ball, the very Vegeta or Piccolo type character who is a villain against you, who then comes around and joins your side, and I would love to see like a lot more interaction between him and Chrono.
Okay.
Like especially as you go through, and you've already seen through scenes of who he was and what he became, but maybe a little bit more of a kind of redemption arc for him, because like, yes, it's there and he becomes part of the team, but I would really like to kind of like solidify that a little bit more.
I would also like Easter eggs, like little Easter eggs that can connect to Chrono Cross, maybe. Like just little things that you probably didn't know. Like maybe a frozen flame or something that happened somewhere. Just little hints here and there. To the point where with the endings, like it'd be interesting if they have some interesting ideas of what to do with the endings in different ways. I still want the sacrifice, but I also want to see what other options they have other than the 16.
Yeah.
And so
absolutely, I mean, and that would be like the one place, honestly, because I'm being really conservative with how much I would change the story. I wouldn't really change much at all, but that would be one area for the ending, since the original had so many, that you could actually be a little creative and come up with more endings, more spots in the game for you to be able to go and win and have it change and have it, what kind of like, just all that kind of stuff. How does this affect the timelines? All that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So, but for the listeners, we'll love to hear your thoughts of what you think Chrono Trigger should be. Hell, tell us if you think Chrono Trigger should not come back. It's fine for what it is. Keep it the way it is. But we want it to come back, and we want to see it because it deserves to be up there among one of the best games Square Enix have ever made. And the fact that now seeing that Mana is getting all this love, we want Chrono Trigger to be on that bus too. Even if it's just a port. Another port is another good sign that is still alive and they're keeping the trademark alive. Even the fact that one of my other secrets I would love is they have a little secret cliffhanger somewhere in that game where maybe that chrono break can come back in some shape or form, right? You know, like something like, maybe this is set up for a sequel if it does well, kind of thing. But not enough to disturb the story. It'd be kind of like after credits kind of thing, right? So you can accept it or not accept it, whatever. But we definitely took the time to try to really think hard about doing this, and this was actually my call. When I sent him the message, I was like, it's time. And he was we need to take a chance on this idea and just see it, because it's been over 20 years. This is a game that's so beloved, has not been touched really at all. So
this game and Final Fantasy VI, that's another one. Like, as 7's getting all this love, 4 got a DLC sequel on the Wii, and it's like 4 got completely remade for the DS, and then you have remasters for like 9 and 8, and then and 10 and 10-2 and 12, and it's just like 6 remains untouched, other than a GBA port, and then like these new pixel perfect ports. So I mean, it's still around, but like it's not getting this remake love. It's not getting this like reimagining love that the other series stuff is getting. And also another one that is really right along with Chrono, where it has a really deep and diehard fan base, is Earthbound. Mothers from Japan. We only ever got Earthbound legitimately over here until the Wii U era. I think we got the NES original game.
Yes, we did
on that one. But then Mother 3 never really came out over here. That was on the Game Boy Advance. So it's like, you have these games that did get made, or or the third one did, and then we still never saw it a legit. We got fan translation ROMs to play, but then that's another one that they're still around in the Smash Brothers series. Like they exist within Nintendo lore, and they choose not to do anything with it.
Yeah,
and honestly, I kind of feel the same way with Chrono. It's there. It's part of Square history. And they acknowledge that, obviously, otherwise they wouldn't have done the DS, and it wouldn't have been released on the phones. So it's there. I just kind of wish it was given a little bit more love. And as you said, at bare minimum, put it out now. Put it on the Switch now. Put it on the PS5 or PS4 now as a really good port. And I think as I said, I'd be all about buying it, even just a port. Just that way I'm future-proofing the ways that I can back and replay this game as I get older, and maybe I choose not to keep all my old consoles or all my old things up to speed on my newer displays. I have a newer way to play the game, and that brings it to the masses. There's 120 million PS4s out there. If you put it on the PS4 and then you put it on the main page, Chrono Trigger, Square, some kid's going to play it for the first time, just like we did. And we weren't kids when we played it, but it made me feel like a kid. It truly, that experience is why it's so high on my list, because never before have I ever played a game and kicked myself so hard for not playing it before I did.
But at least you played it. That's the most important thing. At least you play it. And so now you're among one of the people that love that game as much as I do and whatnot. And now is even better, because if they decide to do a full remake, it's going to look gorgeous if they decide to do it. So Square, if you ever run into this, which we don't know, hopefully that you will kind of take some ideas or vision, or even if you are a listener or a watcher or whatever, spread it. Let them know that there's still Chrono Trigger fans out there. Tell them we still want something. They'll listen, hopefully. And so, as you know, this is part of the In-Game Boss program, Network Game and other variety shows, and part of the Game Addict podcast. And thank you so much for watching. Actually, this is our first video for our show. That is, so nothing's better than doing Chrono Trigger for it. And if you're a listener, we have all our listening spots, and all my places. But Brandon, where can they find your stuff?
You can check it out over at GameAddictsPodcast.com. Of course, on podcast services all around the globe. If we're not there, let me know. Of course, that's Spotify, Apple, all those good places. Podbean is our host, as well as YouTube. And be sure to also check out some of the other stuff that I'm a part of as well. Links are on the Game Addicts Podcast page. Journey to Comics, Rank 'em All podcast, all that nice stuff. It's fun. Enjoy the ride.
All right. And now that we finally got some, we're going to kind of get back on track, back to our monthly show. So we got quite a list to give you. We can't wait to share more. With that, thank you so much and have a great day.